I heard them, right from my own bedroom, whispering about my mother's deed, plotting like it was a movie script. By morning, my accounts were empty, and my world, well, it felt like it was collapsing. Today, I'm going to tell you something deeply personal. Stories like mine happen more often than you think. Stick around, because you might just learn how to protect yourself from this kind of betrayal. If you feel moved by what I'm about to share, please leave a like and subscribe, because these stories need to reach others who might be walking the same painful path I once walked. I never imagined my life would become this. I'm 73 years old, and I live in a modest brick house in Cleveland, Ohio, on a quiet street where the maple trees turn gold every autumn and the neighbors still wave from their porches. For 47 years, I raised my children in this house. I scrubbed these floors on my hands and knees. I painted these walls with my late husband, Harry, back when our dreams were fresh and our backs didn't ache with every movement. The floorboards creak in the hallway, a sound I've grown to love because it reminds me of all the little feet that once ran through here, all the laughter that once filled these rooms. But lately, the creaking just sounds lonely. My son Michael is 49 now. He married Vanessa 15 years ago, and they have 2 children, my grandchildren, whom I adore more than words can express. Michael used to be such a sweet boy, always helping me carry groceries, always asking if I needed anything fixed around the house. But somewhere along the way, something changed. Maybe it was the pressure of providing for his own family. Maybe it was Vanessa's influence, I don't know. All I know is that the man who used to hug me tight and call me his best friend now barely looks me in the eye. It was a Tuesday evening in late September when everything started to unravel. I remember because Tuesdays are when I usually make my pot roast, the one with the carrots and potatoes that Harry loved so much. I had just finished setting the table when Michael and Vanessa arrived. They didn't call ahead, which was unusual, but I was happy to see them. I'm always happy to see them, even when they only come around when they need something. We sat in the living room, the one with the old floral couch that sags in the middle, and the photos on the mantel, pictures of birthday parties and graduations and Christmases long past. Michael seemed nervous, kept glancing at Vanessa like he was waiting for permission to speak. Finally, he cleared his throat and said they needed to talk to me about something important. My heart sank. I knew that tone. It was the same tone he used when he asked to borrow money for the down payment on their house. The same tone when he needed help with their car payments. The same tone when Vanessa's mother got sick and they needed funds for medical bills. This time, Michael explained that they were struggling financially. Business was slow, he said. Vanessa had been let go from her job at the insurance company. They were behind on their mortgage, and the bank was threatening foreclosure. As he spoke, I watched Vanessa's face. She sat there with her arms crossed, her lips pressed into a thin line, and I noticed she wouldn't meet my gaze. Something felt off, but I pushed the feeling away. These were my children, my family. Of course, I would help them. Michael asked if I could help them manage my finances. Just temporarily, he said. They wanted to make sure my bills were paid on time, that I wasn't getting scammed by telemarketers or falling behind on property taxes. He made it sound like they were doing me a favor, like I was some helpless old woman who couldn't handle her own checkbook. I wanted to protest, to tell him I'd been managing money just fine for 5 decades, but the look on his face stopped me. He seemed so desperate, so tired. And Vanessa, well, she just stared at her phone, scrolling through something barely present in the conversation. Against my better judgment, I agreed. I gave them access to my accounts, signed the papers they brought, papers I should have read more carefully but didn't because I trusted them. They were my son and daughter-in-law. Why wouldn't I trust them? Michael hugged me before they left, and for a moment, I felt that old warmth, that connection we used to have. But as I watched their car pull away from the curb, red taillights disappearing into the evening darkness, a cold feeling settled in my chest, a whisper of doubt I couldn't quite name. The weeks that followed were strange. Michael and Vanessa started coming by more often, but the visits felt different. They'd arrive with briefcases and folders, sitting at my kitchen table with their laptops open, talking in hushed voices about accounts and transfers and investment opportunities. They told me they were organizing my finances, making sure everything was secure for my future. I made them coffee and brought out cookies, trying to be helpful, trying to feel included in decisions about my own life. but mostly, I felt like a visitor in my own home, watching them shuffle through papers I didn't understand, signing documents they assured me were routine. One afternoon, I asked to see the statements for my savings account, the one Harry and I had built together over decades of careful saving. Michael hesitated, exchanged a glance with Vanessa, then told me not to worry about it. Everything was fine, he said. They were taking care of it. His tone was dismissive, almost condescending, like I was a child asking questions above my comprehension. I felt a flush of anger rise in my chest, but I swallowed it down. I didn't want to cause conflict. I didn't want to seem ungrateful for their help. That evening, after they left, I sat alone in the living room with a cup of tea growing cold in my hands. The house felt too quiet, too empty. I looked at the photographs on the wall, pictures of Michael as a baby, as a young boy with a gap-toothed smile, as a teenager proud in his graduation gown. Where had that boy gone? When did my sweet son become this stranger who spoke to me like I was a burden? I tried to shake off the unease, told myself I was being paranoid, that my mind was playing tricks on me in my old age. But the doubt lingered, a shadow I couldn't quite escape. I want you to understand something about sacrifice. For 47 years, I sacrificed everything for my family. When Harry died 12 years ago from a sudden heart attack, I used his life insurance money not for myself, but to help Michael start his business. When Vanessa wanted to go back to school, I paid her tuition. When they needed a bigger house for the grandkids, I gave them the down payment. I babysat every weekend, cooked their meals, cleaned their house when Vanessa was too tired. I never asked for anything in return except maybe a phone call now and then, maybe a visit that wasn't just about what they needed from me. My entire life has been about giving. I grew up during hard times, when you learn to stretch every dollar to make do with what you had. My mother taught me that family comes first, that you take care of your own no matter what. I carried that lesson with me, wore it like armor, believed it would protect me from loneliness and abandonment. But what happens when the people you sacrifice for start to see you not as a person, but as a resource? What happens when your love becomes something to exploit rather than cherish? I remember one particular evening. It must have been early October. The air had that crisp bite of autumn. Michael called to ask if I could lend them $5,000. Just a short-term loan, he promised. They'd pay me back by the end of the month. I had heard this before, so many times before. The loans that were never repaid, the promises that dissolved like sugar in rain. But I said yes anyway, because that's what I always did. I transferred the money from my savings account, watching the balance drop with a sick feeling in my stomach. When the end of the month came and went with no mention of repayment, I finally worked up the courage to ask about it. Michael's response was cold, clipped. He told me they were going through a rough patch, that I needed to be patient, that families should support each other without keeping score. The hypocrisy of his words stung like a slap. I was the one keeping this family afloat, and somehow I was being made to feel selfish for wanting what was rightfully mine. The breaking point came on a night I'll never forget. It was late, past 11, and I had already gone to bed. I'm a light sleeper, have been ever since Harry died, and I started living alone. Any little noise wakes me up. That night, I heard voices downstairs. At first, I thought I was dreaming, but then I realized the voices were real. Michael and Vanessa were in my house, in my bedroom actually, because my bedroom is on the first floor now since my knees can't handle the stairs anymore. I lay there frozen, my heart pounding so hard, I thought it might break through my ribs. I could hear them clearly, whispering, but not quietly enough. "Find the deed," Vanessa was saying. "When my mother dies, it's ours. We just need to make sure everything's in order." Michael's voice was lower, harder to make out, but I heard enough. Something about accounts, about transfers, about making sure no one could trace anything back to them. My blood ran cold. My own son, my baby boy, was conspiring with his wife to steal from me. I wanted to leap out of bed, to confront them right then and there, to demand an explanation. But fear held me in place. Fear and disbelief and a crushing sense of betrayal that made it hard to breathe. I stayed perfectly still, listening to them rummage through my drawers, through the papers I kept in the old wooden chest at the foot of my bed. They took something. I heard papers rustling, a drawer closing softly. Then their footsteps retreated, the front door opened and closed with a quiet click, and I was alone again with the deafening silence of my own shock. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in the darkness, staring at the ceiling, trying to make sense of what I had heard. Maybe I misunderstood, I told myself. Maybe it was taken out of context. But deep down, I knew the truth. I had known for weeks, maybe months, that something was wrong. I had just been too afraid to admit it, too afraid to face the reality that my own child was betraying me in the worst possible way. When morning came, I forced myself out of bed. My body felt heavy, like I was moving through water. I made coffee, but the smell made me nauseous. I sat at the kitchen table and stared at nothing, my mind racing through every interaction, every request for money, every time I had given and given and given without question. How long had this been going on? How much had they already taken? And what did Vanessa mean when she said the words that kept echoing in my head like a terrible refrain? When my mother dies, it's ours. I knew I needed to check my accounts, but I was terrified of what I might find. With shaking hands, I opened my laptop, the one Michael had set up for me years ago, teaching me how to check my email and pay bills online. I logged into my bank account, and what I saw made my stomach drop. My savings account, the one that had held over $80,000 just 6 months ago, was nearly empty. There were hundreds of transactions I didn't recognize, transfers to accounts I had never authorized, withdrawals for amounts that made my head spin. $80,000. Gone. My entire life's savings, the money Harry and I had scraped together through decades of hard work and careful planning, the security blanket I thought would protect me in my old age, vanished like it had never existed. I felt like I was falling, like the ground had opened up beneath me and I was tumbling into an abyss with no bottom. My hands trembled so violently I could barely move the mouse. I clicked through statement after statement, each one confirming my worst fears. Michael and Vanessa had been systematically draining my accounts for months, maybe longer. The room spun. I gripped the edge of the table trying to steady myself, trying to breathe through the panic that was crushing my chest. How could they do this to me? How could my own son look me in the eye, hug me, tell me he loved me, all while stealing everything I had? The betrayal cut deeper than any pain I had ever known, deeper even than losing Harry, because at least Harry's death wasn't a choice. This was deliberate. This was calculated. This was my child choosing money over his mother. I sat there for hours, frozen in shock, unable to process the magnitude of what had happened. The sun moved across the sky, casting long shadows through the kitchen window, but I barely noticed. I felt like a ghost in my own life, watching from a distance as everything I had believed in crumbled to dust. The photos on the wall, the memories of birthday parties and family dinners, they all felt like lies now. Pretty pictures covering an ugly truth I had been too blind to see. By the time the sun set, I still hadn't moved. I hadn't eaten, hadn't called anyone, hadn't done anything except sit and stare and try to make sense of the senseless. The house grew dark around me, but I didn't bother turning on the lights. I preferred the darkness. It felt appropriate somehow, a reflection of the emptiness that had taken root inside me. My son had stolen my money, my security, my future, and I had no idea what I was going to do about it. Looking back now, I can see how naive I was, how desperately I had clung to the fantasy of a loving family, even when all the evidence pointed to something darker. But in that moment, sitting alone in my dark kitchen with the weight of betrayal pressing down on me like a physical force, I couldn't see anything except the ruins of everything I had believed in. My world had collapsed, and I didn't know if I had the strength to rebuild it. The next few weeks were a blur of denial and despair. I didn't confront Michael and Vanessa. I couldn't. Every time I thought about what I had heard that night, what I had discovered in my bank accounts, a wave of nausea would wash over me. I felt paralyzed, trapped between my love for my son and the undeniable truth of his betrayal. I kept hoping there was some explanation, some mistake I had made in understanding what was happening. But the numbers didn't lie. My accounts were empty, and my son had done it. I stopped sleeping properly. Every night, I lay awake replaying memories, searching for signs I had missed. Had Michael always been this way? Had I raised him to see me as nothing more than a source of income? I thought about all the times I had said yes when I should have said no, All the boundaries I had failed to set because I was afraid of being seen as selfish or unloving. I had taught him that my love was conditional on my giving, that my value lay in what I could provide rather than who I was. And now I was paying the price for that mistake. Michael and Vanessa continued coming by the house, acting as though nothing had changed. They would sit at my kitchen table, talking about their plans, their problems, their needs, all while I served them coffee and smiled and nodded like a puppet on strings. Inside, I was screaming. Inside, I wanted to grab them by the shoulders and demand they give back what they had stolen, but I couldn't find the words. I couldn't find the courage, so I stayed silent, choking on my own pain, drowning in my own cowardice. One afternoon, Vanessa asked if I could watch the grandkids for the weekend. They wanted to take a trip, she said, just the two of them, to reconnect and work on their marriage. The irony was so bitter I almost laughed. They were going to take a vacation, probably funded by my stolen money, while I sat at home babysitting and pretending everything was fine. I wanted to say no. God, how I wanted to say no. But when I looked at my grandchildren's faces, so innocent and trusting, I couldn't do it. I agreed, hating myself for my weakness, hating them for exploiting it. That weekend, as I played with my grandchildren in the backyard, pushing them on the old swing set Harry had built decades ago, I felt the full weight of my situation settle over me. These children, whom I loved with every fiber of my being, had parents who saw me as nothing more than a cash machine. What kind of example was I setting for them? What lessons were they learning about family, about respect, about love? I was teaching them that it was acceptable to use people, to take and take without giving anything in return. I was teaching them that I had no value beyond what I could provide. The realization was devastating. I had spent my entire life trying to be a good mother, a good grandmother, a good person. But somewhere along the way, I had lost myself. I had become so focused on meeting everyone else's needs that I had forgotten I had needs too. I had forgotten that I deserved respect, that I deserved honesty, that I deserved to be treated like a human being rather than a resource to be exploited. I remember one particularly painful moment during that weekend. I was making lunch for the kids, grilled cheese sandwiches and tomato soup, when my granddaughter asked me why I always did everything for everyone. She's 12, perceptive in the way children sometimes are. I laughed it off, told her it was because I loved them. But she tilted her head, studying me with those serious eyes, and said something that cut right through me. "Grandma," she said, "don't you ever do things just for you? Don't you ever want to be happy?" I stood there at the stove, spatula in hand, unable to answer. Did I ever do things just for me? When was the last time I had done something purely for my own happiness, not because someone needed me or expected it of me? I couldn't remember. My entire identity had become wrapped up in serving others, in sacrificing, in giving, until there was nothing left to give. And now, with my accounts empty and my son stealing from me, I had reached the end of that road. There was nothing left to give. I had given it all away, and it still wasn't enough. That night, after the children had gone to bed, I sat on my back porch and cried. I cried for the mother I had tried to be, for the family I had wanted to have, for the future I had thought I was securing. I cried for Harry, who would have been appalled by what our son had become, and I cried for myself, for the woman I had allowed myself to become, so desperate for love and connection that I had let myself be used and discarded like trash. The autumn air was cold against my skin, carrying the scent of dying leaves and approaching winter. I wrapped my cardigan tighter around my shoulders and looked up at the stars, those distant points of light that seemed so far away from the darkness I was drowning in. I thought about giving up, about just accepting that this was my lot in life, that I deserved this somehow. But a small voice inside me, a voice I had ignored for too long, whispered that I was worth more than this. I deserved better, I deserved respect, and I deserved to fight back. The next morning, when Michael and Vanessa came to pick up the kids, I watched them closely. Michael barely acknowledged me, just called to the children and hustled them into the car. Vanessa didn't even come to the door, just waited in the passenger seat scrolling through her phone. No thank you, no appreciation, nothing. They took and took and took, and I had let them. But as I watched their car drive away, something shifted inside me. The sadness began to harden into anger, the despair into determination. I was done being a victim. I was done being silent. It was time to take back my life. But I didn't know where to start. I felt so alone, so lost. Who could I turn to? Who would believe me if I told them what my own son had done? The shame of it was almost worse than the betrayal itself. I had always been so proud of Michael, had always bragged to my friends about what a good son he was. How could I admit now that it had all been a lie, that I'd been blind to his true nature? The thought of exposing the truth felt like exposing my own failure as a mother. Days passed. I went through the motions of living, making meals I didn't eat, cleaning a house that felt more like a prison than a home. I avoided looking at my bank accounts, couldn't bear to see the evidence of my son's betrayal staring back at me in black and white. I stopped answering Michael's calls, let them go to voicemail, listened to his increasingly irritated messages asking why I wasn't picking up. He sounded annoyed, like I was inconveniencing him by not being available at his beck and call. The audacity of it made my blood boil. One afternoon in late October, I was sitting in my living room when the doorbell rang. I considered not answering, didn't have the energy to deal with whatever new demand was about to be placed on me. But something made me get up, made me walk to the door and open it. Standing on my porch was Sarah, my neighbor from 3 houses down. She's about my age, widowed like me. And we've been friendly over the years, though not particularly close. She was holding a casserole dish and wearing a concerned expression. "I heard you've been under the weather," she said. "I brought you some dinner." I started to protest, to tell her I was fine, but something in her kind eyes broke through my defenses. Before I knew it, I was crying, standing in my doorway sobbing like a child, while Sarah set down the casserole and wrapped her arms around me. She didn't ask questions, didn't demand explanations. She just held me while I fell apart, whispering that it was okay, that I was going to be okay, that I wasn't alone. We sat in my living room for hours that day. I told her everything. The whole sordid story of betrayal and theft and the unbearable loneliness of realizing the people you love most in the world see you as nothing more than a means to an end. Sarah listened without judgment, her face growing more and more serious as I spoke. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she said something I'll never forget. "You know what the worst part of this is?" she said. "It's not just that they stole your money, it's that they stole your dignity. They made you believe you had no value beyond what you could give them. But you're wrong. You're worth so much more than they've led you to believe." Her words sparked something inside me, a tiny flame of hope in the darkness that had consumed me. Maybe she was right. Maybe I did have value beyond my ability to solve everyone else's problems. Maybe it wasn't too late to reclaim my life, my dignity, my sense of self. Sarah took my hand and squeezed it gently. "You need to fight back," she said. "You need to show them that you won't be used anymore, and I'm going to help you do it." That conversation was the turning point. For the first time since discovering the truth, I felt like I wasn't drowning alone in this nightmare. I had an ally, someone who saw me not as a resource, but as a person deserving of respect and justice. Sarah became my confidant, my supporter, my friend in the truest sense of the word. She helped me research lawyers, encouraged me to document everything, reminded me on the days when I wanted to give up that I was strong enough to see this through. But there was someone else, too. Someone even more unexpected who would play a crucial role in my awakening. My granddaughter, Emma, Michael's oldest child. She's 16 now, smart as a whip and increasingly aware of the tension in her family. She had always been close to me, spending summers at my house, helping me in the garden, asking me to teach her how to make Harry's favorite apple pie. But lately, I had noticed a distance growing between us, and I wondered if her parents had been poisoning her against me. One Saturday in early November, Emma showed up at my door unannounced. She looked upset, her eyes red like she had been crying. I invited her in, made her hot chocolate the way I used to when she was little, and waited for her to tell me what was wrong. What she said nearly knocked me off my feet. "Grandma," she said, "I need to tell you something about my parents, something I think you should know." My heart started racing. I wasn't sure I wanted to hear what she had to say, wasn't sure I could handle any more revelations about my son's character. But Emma needed to tell me, and I needed to listen. So I sat down at the kitchen table across from her and braced myself for whatever was coming. Emma took a deep breath, her hands wrapped around the mug of hot chocolate, and began to speak. She told me that she had overheard her parents talking, planning. They were discussing my house, my assets, what would happen when I was gone. Vanessa had said they needed to make sure everything was in their names, that they couldn't risk me leaving anything to charity or to other family members. Michael had agreed, said they had been working on it for months, moving money, changing paperwork, ensuring that when the time came, everything I owned would go to them. Emma said her mother had even joked about it, had laughed and said I was too trusting, too stupid to realize what they were doing. The room spun. I gripped the edge of the table, trying to steady myself as Emma's words washed over me like acid. Too trusting, too stupid. My own daughter-in-law talking about me with such contempt, such cruelty. And Michael, my son, agreeing with her, participating in this scheme to rob me not just of my money, but of my future, my security, my very existence. I felt like I might be sick. Emma was crying now, tears streaming down her face. "I'm so sorry, Grandma," she whispered. "I should have told you sooner. I knew something was wrong, but I didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to think my own parents could do something like this. But when I heard Mom laughing about it, saying you'd never figure it out because you're too old and senile, I couldn't keep quiet anymore. You deserve to know the truth." I reached across the table and took Emma's hand. She was trembling, caught between loyalty to her parents and loyalty to me, and I could see the toll it was taking on her. "Thank you," I said, my voice breaking. "Thank you for being brave enough to tell me. You've given me the greatest gift anyone could give right now, the truth. And I promise you, I'm going to do something about it. I'm not going to let them get away with this." That night, after Emma left, I sat alone in the darkness and let the full weight of the situation settle over me. My son and his wife had been systematically stealing from me for months, possibly years. They had manipulated me, lied to me, used my love and trust as weapons against me. They had plotted my financial ruin, had joked about my incompetence, had treated me like I was already dead, and my possessions were theirs for the taking. The betrayal was so complete, so absolute, that I could barely comprehend it. But along with the devastation came clarity. I finally understood what I was dealing with. This wasn't a misunderstanding or a series of unfortunate decisions. This was calculated theft, deliberate exploitation, willful cruelty. My son had looked at me and seen not a mother but a resource to be drained. And I had let him do it because I was afraid of losing his love, afraid of being alone, afraid of admitting that the family I had built was nothing more than an illusion. I thought about Emma's courage in coming to me, in choosing what was right over what was easy. She had risked her relationship with her parents to protect me, to give me the information I needed to fight back. That 16-year-old girl had more integrity in her little finger than her parents had in their entire bodies. She had shown me that I wasn't wrong to expect better, to demand respect, to refuse to be treated like garbage. She had given me permission to be angry, to be hurt, and most importantly, to take action. The next morning, I called Sarah and told her about Emma's revelation. Sarah's reaction was immediate and fierce. "That's it," she said. "We're going to a lawyer first thing Monday morning. We're going to document everything, and we're going to make sure they pay for what they've done. You're not alone in this fight. I've got your back, and we're going to get justice." Monday came, and true to her word, Sarah drove me to a lawyer's office downtown. The lawyer, a woman named Patricia Chen, listened to my story with a grave expression. She asked questions, took notes, and when I finished, she looked me straight in the eye. "Mrs. Anderson," she said, "what your son and daughter-in-law have done is called financial elder abuse. It's a crime, and it's far more common than you might think. Research shows that 16% of relationships with financial infidelity end in divorce, and victims range from 53 to 104 years old. You are not alone in this. Hearing those words, knowing that others had faced what I was facing, gave me strength I didn't know I possessed. Patricia outlined a plan of action. First, we would gather all the documentation, every bank statement, every transaction, every piece of evidence that proved Michael and Vanessa had stolen from me. Then we would confront them, not emotionally but legally, with clear demands for restitution. If they refused, we would take them to court. It wouldn't be easy, Patricia warned. Family law cases involving financial abuse are always complicated, always painful, but I had a strong case, and she believed we could win. I left that office feeling like a different person. For the first time in months, I wasn't drowning in despair. I had a plan. I had allies. I had hope. The road ahead would be difficult, I knew that. But I was ready to fight. I was ready to reclaim my life, my dignity, my self-worth. My son had tried to reduce me to nothing more than a bank account to be emptied. But I was so much more than that. And it was time to remind him of that fact. Over the next few weeks, Sarah and I worked tirelessly to build my case. We went through every bank statement, highlighting suspicious transactions, documenting the systematic theft that had occurred. I discovered that Michael and Vanessa had not only drained my savings, but had also taken out loans in my name, loans I knew nothing about. My credit score had plummeted. I was thousands of dollars in debt I had never agreed to. The scope of their betrayal was staggering. Patricia filed paperwork with the court, initiating legal action against Michael and Vanessa. She also helped me freeze my remaining accounts, change all my passwords, and revoke the power of attorney I had so foolishly granted them. Each step felt like taking back a piece of myself, reclaiming ground I had ceded in my desperation to be loved and needed. It was terrifying and exhilarating all at once. Michael called me after he received the legal notice. His voice was cold, angry, nothing like the son I remembered. "How could you do this to us?" he demanded. "After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us?" The audacity of his words took my breath away. He was trying to make me feel guilty, trying to manipulate me even now, but I was done falling for his games. I told him calmly that we would address everything in court, and I hung up. My hands were shaking, but I felt proud of myself for not backing down. That evening, Vanessa sent me a long text message. It was full of accusations and justifications, claiming they had only been trying to help me, that I was too old to manage my own finances, that they had a right to protect their inheritance. She called me ungrateful, said I was destroying the family, said their children would never forgive me. I read the message once, then deleted it. Her words had no power over me anymore. I knew the truth, and no amount of manipulation could change that. The weeks leading up to the confrontation were agonizing. I barely slept, my mind constantly replaying conversations, anticipating arguments, preparing myself for the battle ahead. Sarah checked on me daily, bringing me meals, keeping me company, reminding me why I was doing this. Emma visited when she could, sneaking away from her parents to see me. She told me that things at home were tense, that her parents were furious, that they were saying terrible things about me. But she also told me she was proud of me, that I was doing the right thing. Her words meant more to me than she could ever know. Finally, the day of the confrontation arrived. Patricia had arranged a mediation session, a chance for both sides to present their case before potentially going to trial. I walked into that conference room with Sarah by my side, my heart pounding, but my resolve firm. Michael and Vanessa were already there, sitting across the table with their own lawyer. They wouldn't look at me, just stared at the papers in front of them with stony expressions. The mediator explained the process, and then Patricia presented our case. She laid out the evidence methodically, transaction by transaction, loan by loan, showing the clear pattern of theft and financial manipulation. She presented Emma's testimony, which had been given in a private session to protect her from her parents' retaliation. She showed how Michael and Vanessa had systematically drained my accounts, forged my signature on documents, and lied to me repeatedly about my financial situation. When Patricia finished, the room was silent. The mediator turned to Michael and Vanessa's lawyer, asking for their response. Their lawyer tried to argue that I had given them permission, that I had been confused and needed their help. But Patricia had anticipated this defense. She presented medical records showing I had no cognitive impairment, no signs of dementia or confusion. She presented my testimony clear and coherent, detailing exactly what had happened. The evidence was overwhelming. I watched Michael's face as Patricia spoke. I kept hoping to see some sign of remorse, some hint that he understood the magnitude of what he had done. But there was nothing. Just cold, hard anger. He saw himself as the victim here, as the wronged party. He couldn't or wouldn't acknowledge that he had stolen from his own mother, that he had betrayed the woman who had given him everything. That realization was almost more painful than the theft itself. The mediator asked if Michael and Vanessa were willing to make restitution, to repay what they had stolen. Their lawyer consulted with them in whispered tones. Then Michael spoke for the first time, his voice hard and bitter. "We don't have that kind of money," he said. "We used it to pay off debts, to keep our house, to survive. If you force us to repay you, we'll lose everything." "Is that what you want, Mom? To destroy your own family?" His words were designed to make me feel guilty, to make me back down. And God help me, for a moment, I wavered. The thought of my grandchildren suffering, of them losing their home, filled me with anguish. But then I remembered Emma's testimony, remembered Vanessa laughing about me being too stupid to figure out what they were doing. I remembered all the times I had sacrificed for them, all the boundaries I had failed to set because I was afraid of losing their love. I remembered that this wasn't about revenge, it was about justice. It was about teaching them that actions have consequences, that you can't use people without eventually paying a price. I looked directly at Michael for the first time since entering the room. "You stole from me," I said, my voice steady despite the tears streaming down my face. "You looked me in the eye and lied to me while you drained my accounts. You planned for my death like it was a business transaction. You called me stupid, senile, too old to matter. So no, Michael, I won't back down. You will repay what you stole, every penny, or you will face criminal charges. That's not me destroying the family. That's you facing the consequences of your choices." The mediation ended with no resolution. Michael and Vanessa refused to agree to a repayment plan, so Patricia filed criminal charges on my behalf. The case would go to court, and the whole ugly truth would become public record. I knew that meant the end of any relationship with my son. I knew it meant painful scrutiny from neighbors and friends, but I also knew it was the right thing to do. I couldn't let them get away with what they had done. I couldn't send the message to Emma and her siblings that this kind of behavior was acceptable. The trial took months to get on the docket. During that time, I focused on rebuilding my life. I got a part-time job at a local bookstore, something I had always wanted to do but never had time for. I started attending a support group for victims of financial elder abuse and met others who had been through similar ordeals. Their stories were heartbreaking, but they also showed me I wasn't alone. This epidemic of adult children exploiting their aging parents was far more common than anyone wanted to admit. Emma continued to visit me regularly. She had made the difficult decision to testify against her parents, knowing it would change her relationship with them forever. I told her she didn't have to do it, that I would understand if she couldn't go through with it. But she was determined. "What they did was wrong," she said, "and if I don't speak up, I'm telling myself it's okay to treat people that way." "You taught me better than that, Grandma. You taught me about integrity, even if my parents forgot." The trial itself was brutal. Sitting in that courtroom, listening to lawyers describe my son as a criminal, as someone who preyed on vulnerable elderly people, was surreal and devastating. But the evidence was undeniable. Bank records, forged documents, testimony from Emma and others, it all painted a clear picture of systematic financial abuse. Michael's lawyer tried to argue that I had given permission, that I was a willing participant. But my testimony, combined with the evidence, demolished that defense. The moment that broke me came when Emma took the stand. She was so composed, so brave as she described overhearing her parents' conversations, their plans, their cruel jokes about me. Michael tried to interrupt, shouting that she was lying, that I had poisoned her against them. The judge ordered him to be silent. When Emma finished her testimony, she looked directly at me and mouthed the words, "I love you, Grandma." I lost it then, sobbing so hard I could barely breathe, overwhelmed by the love of this remarkable young woman and the betrayal of the son I had raised. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. They found Michael and Vanessa guilty on multiple counts of financial elder abuse, fraud, and identity theft. The judge ordered them to repay every penny they had stolen, plus interest and legal fees. He also sentenced them to community service and probation. Michael could have gone to jail, but the judge showed mercy because it was a first offense and because of the family circumstances. As the verdict was read, I felt no triumph, only profound sadness for what my family had become. After the trial, Michael and Vanessa were forced to sell their house to begin repaying me. The social consequences were swift and severe. Friends who had once admired them turned their backs. People in the community learned what they had done through news coverage of the trial. Michael lost clients at his business. Vanessa couldn't find a new job because of the public record of her conviction. They were shunned, judged, ostracized. Part of me felt sorry for them, but mostly I felt that justice had been served. Emma and her siblings came to live with me during the transition. Michael and Vanessa moved into a small apartment, struggling to rebuild their lives and repay their debt to me. I saw them occasionally, brief, awkward encounters that were more painful than pleasant. Michael never apologized, never acknowledged what he had done. He remained convinced that he was the victim, that I had ruined his life out of spite. That hurt more than anything, knowing that my son would never take responsibility for his actions, would never understand the pain he had caused. But even in the midst of that pain, something wonderful was happening. I was discovering who I was beyond being someone's mother, someone's caretaker, someone's resource. I was finding joy in simple things, reading books just because I wanted to, taking walks in the park, learning to paint. Sarah and I became close friends, going to movies, trying new restaurants, traveling to places I had always wanted to see but never had the time or permission to visit. Emma became my constant companion. She saw firsthand the consequences of her parents' actions and vowed to never follow in their footsteps. We talked for hours about what family really means, about the difference between love and manipulation, about the importance of boundaries and self-respect. I watched her grow into a remarkable young woman, someone with integrity and compassion, and I knew that even though I had lost my son, I had gained something precious in my relationship with her. Slowly, over many months, I began to rebuild my finances. The court-ordered restitution came in small increments, but it was something. I learned to live more modestly, to appreciate what I had, rather than constantly giving it away. I set up a separate account for Emma's future, money that would help her with college, with starting her life on the right foot. I wanted to give her what I had tried to give Michael, a foundation of security and love. But this time, I was doing it with healthy boundaries, with the understanding that love doesn't mean sacrificing yourself until there's nothing left. The turning point in my emotional healing came almost a year after the trial. I was sitting in my backyard on a warm spring evening, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. Emma was beside me, doing homework, and Sarah had just left after bringing over dinner. I looked around at my modest house, my small garden, my simple life, and I realized something profound. I was happy. Not the desperate, anxious happiness that comes from pleasing others, but genuine, deep, soul-level contentment. I had lost my son, my savings, my illusions about family, but I had gained something more valuable: myself. I had learned that I was worth more than what I could give, that my value wasn't measured in dollars or sacrifices. I had learned to say no, to set boundaries, to demand respect. I had learned that real love doesn't exploit or manipulate. Real love honors and cherishes. And I had learned that it's never too late to stand up for yourself, to fight back against those who would use you, to reclaim your dignity and your life. There were still hard days when I missed the son I thought I had, when I grieved for the family that had never really existed. But those days grew fewer and farther between. I focused on the present, on the people who truly loved me, on building a life that brought me peace and joy. I volunteered at a senior center, helping other elderly people recognize and protect themselves from financial abuse. I shared my story, hoping it would give others the courage to stand up for themselves. Emma graduated high school with honors and got accepted to a prestigious university. On the day she left for college, we both cried. But these were different tears, tears of pride and hope rather than pain and betrayal. She hugged me tight and whispered, "Thank you for showing me what strength looks like. Thank you for teaching me that it's okay to protect yourself, even from family. I'm going to make you proud. I told her she already had. That she had saved me as much as I had saved her, that we had rescued each other from a toxic situation neither of us deserved. Now, looking back on everything that happened, I understand that my story isn't unique. Studies show that financial elder abuse affects millions of older adults, often at the hands of their own family members. The manipulator tactics are sneaky, designed to exploit your love and trust. They count on your desire to help, your fear of being alone, your reluctance to believe that someone you love could hurt you so deeply. They use your kindness against you until you're too tangled in their web to see the truth. But here's what I want you to understand. You have the right to protect yourself, even from family. Especially from family. Blood doesn't give someone permission to exploit you. Love doesn't mean accepting abuse. And setting boundaries doesn't make you selfish, it makes you smart. You deserve respect. You deserve honesty. You deserve to be valued for who you are, not what you can provide. If you're going through something similar, if you recognize the red flags in your own life, please know that it's not too late to take action. Reach out for help. Talk to a lawyer, a therapist, a trusted friend. Document everything. Don't let shame or fear keep you silent. You are not alone. There are people who will believe you, support you, and help you fight back. And most importantly, remember that you are worth fighting for. My life today is smaller in some ways than it was before. I have less money, fewer family members, a simpler existence. But it's also richer, fuller, more authentically mine. I wake up each morning without dread, without the weight of others' expectations crushing me. I make decisions based on what I want, what I need, what brings me joy. I have true friends who love me for who I am. I have Emma, who is more family to me than her father ever was. And I have myself, finally, fully, without apology. The sunset I'm watching tonight is the same sun that set on my darkest days, when I thought I had lost everything. But now I see it differently. Each sunset isn't an ending. It's a promise that tomorrow will come, that there's always another chance to choose yourself, to stand up, to live with dignity and purpose. I chose myself, and it was the best decision I ever made. So I ask you now, have you ever seen these red flags in your own life? Have you ever felt used, exploited, undervalued by the people who should love you most? Or do you know someone who's going through this right now? Share your story in the comments. Let's support each other. Let's break the silence around financial elder abuse. And if this story moved you, if it opened your eyes or gave you courage, please like this video and subscribe. These messages need to reach others who are suffering in silence, who think they're alone, who need to know that there's hope on the other side of betrayal. Together we can help each other heal. Together, we can reclaim our lives.